Welcome.
This is another episode of the Defenders of Business Value podcast, a podcast where we talk about what makes a business valuable, learn the tips and tactics to increase your company's value that only veteran deal makers know. And now, here's your host, Ed Mysogland.
Welcome to the Defenders of Business Value. I'm your host, Ed Mysogland. I appreciate you coming back again for some more excitement here on the podcast. So today, my guest is Brett Caines of Lumos, Lumos. And Lumos is an organization that helps banks make better credit decisions. And you're sitting here saying, well, this Defenders of Business Value, we're talking about value and deals and so on and so forth. Well, the reason I have him on is I really believe that what he's doing is the future, is a big part of the future of buying and selling a company. What Lumos does is they are aggregating data across, he was saying a billion data points that they're compiling and reviewing and helping banks determine whether or not this loan is a good loan or not. And they help the banks establish the risk tolerance. You know, what do they have an appetite for? And the reason I have him on is I believe that going forward that we're going to see him, likely Lumos, that is, they are the signal for buyers that the business is worthy. And as I talked to Brett about this, one of the things that we need in the marketplace is an early warning system. So when you review like a Lumos data score that says, yeah, thumbs up, this is a good opportunity. If you know that early on that it's a bankable deal, it's a different animal than if you don't make the score. And so that business owner now knows either I got to change my value or I have to change my how I'm operating in order to be bankable, or I have to become the bank. But wouldn't it be great to know that on the front end? To know that, here's kind of how the deal is going to go down. And you have the predictive information from Lumos, you have cash flow, you have, and the buyer pool. I think it all compiles together and helps the business owner. And that's kind of where I'm heading with our practice and just the future of buying and selling companies, that I do believe that there's going to be more and more opportunities to engage external analytic providers that are going to help buyers and sellers make better decisions. And that's why I have Brett Caines of Lumos Data on the pod. So I hope you enjoy the show. Well, Brett, welcome to the show. I've been looking for this for a long time. So welcome.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. I really appreciate it.
Well, so in recording, my introduction, I always think it comes best from, the overview of my guest comes best from them. I butcher it. I probably say it the way it shouldn't be said, but, just give a high level of you and Lumos.
Yeah. So Lumos, we're just over 2 years old. So relatively young company. Probably the easiest way to sum up Lumos is analytics as a service. Our primary focus is small business lending. So enabling banks to do more small business lending, make better decisions around small business lending, build strategic plans around small business lending activity. And we do all that through data, both historical data, delivering that in an easy to consume sort of way, as well as through predictive models, primarily focused on credit risk.
I got it. Well, and I'm certain a lot of my guests or a lot of my audience is sitting there going, Now explain what in the world that has anything to do with defenders of business value. And you know, when I was looking into this, I do believe that this, what you've got going, is a big part of the future of buying and selling companies. I think people are going to make better decisions because of people like you. And I, as I was telling you before we hit record, I believe that there is that, we're seeing a lot of AI come in. We're seeing a lot of buyers using, AI for just different stuff
Mm-hmm.
to understand industries, quickly understand industries, but more so, at some point somebody has to pull the trigger. Somebody has to be able to risk their equity in buying a company. And how do they mitigate their risk? There's structure, but at some point they start turning to advisors. And that's why I look at Lumos and I'm like, this really is probably at the very beginning of what the future of buying and selling companies looks like. So I guess that's kind of that's the long way of saying, wow, tell me about Lumos and in the buying and selling sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say where is it going, but I know banks are investors in businesses. They're just called banks. So I'm curious to start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, maybe to sort of bridge that gap a little bit. So, from a business valuation perspective, what business valuation is saying to the bank is, hey, this is an appropriate loan amount, for this business. This is the value of the business. You're not lending more than the business is worth. Mm-hmm. And that's an important component for a bank to look at. That's also very important between a buyer and a seller. A buyer wants to understand that business value. All that, your listeners are well aware of that. Okay. So where we come in and kind of bridging that is we're saying to a bank based on certain criteria of this business, and it's not the same criteria that's in a business valuation. It's not margins or cash flow of the business or anything like that, but just historically, loans in this industry, loans of this size, this type of loan, this geography. We have models that look at local economic conditions. So we'll look at employment participation rate as a factor that goes into the predicted performance of this business going forward. And so from that perspective, you start getting the credit department or an underwriter the data they need to make the appropriate risk decision. And then, for the buyer, the person getting the loan for the business, where that starts coming into play is that influences the rate that the buyer is going to get on their loan. So, great, in an area, low unemployment rate, high labor participation rate, very low unemployment, just growing wage growth in the area. Those sorts of things are going to mean that business has much less risk from a bank perspective. So you can start seeing that favorably impact pricing. And, ultimately, what you want to get to, what we hope, to help banks get to is a decision that makes sense for both the bank and the person getting the loan to acquire the business, or, in our case, it's beyond acquisition, working capital, equipment loans, that type of thing.
I got it. So you were employee number 8 on the Live Oak rocket ship. Right?
Yes.
And what prompted you to get off that rocket ship and start building your own?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's if it's like an addiction to stress or an addiction to adrenaline. But yeah. So Live Oak, we started organizing Live Oak in 2007. Then we got a bank charter in 2008. And for anyone that may not know, Live Oak is solely focused on small business lending. It started really heavily utilizing the Small Business Administration's 7A program. They're still, the largest lender in the 7A program, but they do a lot of business loans outside of the 7A program now as well. But those early years, it was just a really fantastic experience, and I mean it continued, being a fantastic experience all the way through. But there's something about that startup phase, and I know that resonates with the folks listening right now. It's you're kind of in it, you're doing everything. It is stressful, but there's also this level of excitement that you're building something neat that's going to last. To kind of go back to the word adrenaline, there's an adrenaline there that's just really fun. So, fast forward, whatever it was, 15 years, just the opportunity to build something again. It's, it would be wonderful if it's, the rocket ship that Live Oak, grew into. We think we're doing, amazing stuff that's going to last and make a difference. And the place where we focus, small business, is not an area within banking that gets a lot of attention, which is one of the things that made Live Oak so special. Just that focus on small business. Banks tend to focus on the consumer side of things. If you look at most technology, even where non-bank fintechs are playing, it's typically consumer focused. So we're hoping to carve out a space and be a fintech leader, thought leader, kind of in that small business banking arena.
I love it. So while you were there, I guess, where did you come from Live Oak, and now all of a sudden you start Lumos, and now we're talking about aggregating data. Number one, where did you get the data? I mean, what were you're like, here, I guess my question is, how many points of data and the prediction, I'm certain there's a ton.
Yeah.
And so what made you say, you know what, I think I can create a predictive type indice that will help banks like Live Oak make great credit decisions. So take it from there.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer the data points, it's well over 1 billion data points that we look at. It's
for each business.
What's that?
For each business?
Oh, no. In aggregate, what the model is built. So,
I got it.
So we have going back about 30 years, 27 years. We have 2 million individual small business loan records.
Okay.
And so that 30 years, 2 million small businesses, we look at monthly payments or debt service on those loans. So all of that together, where it's located, original loan size, charge-offs have occurred. We've got, I think in our data set, 400,000 defaults, 300,000 charge-offs. So that's a robust data set, to inform decisions. If you think at a bank, you'll hear, we're not gonna do the pizza shop because we did a pizza shop 4 years ago and it went bad, so we're never doing another pizza shop. And it's like you're making a decision on one data point. Like we've got 2 million loans, 1 billion data points across all those. Let's use that to make a decision. I mean, we can even drill it down, to your local area, and that's still more than your one data point.
Right.
So you see that often in me. So we're trying to, change that mindset. But really the step, I think that kind of led us to Lumos is just, in banking in general, banks have their internal data. And so, a larger bank, a Chase, they have loads of internal data that they can look at and use to make decisions. But as banks get smaller, that data set gets less and less. And not only is the data set shrinking, but the tools, the resources around properly using that data set also starts to diminish. And then, I mean, there's providers out there that take a bank's internal data set and they help them organize it, create visualizations out of it. And, that's a wonderful step up for a bank. We sort of play outside of that part where we're taking massive amounts of data from a variety of sources, from the SBA, from the FRED, Federal Reserve Economic Database Bureau of Labor and Statistics, U.S. Census Bureau, and putting all that together to say, hey, internally, you may not have all the data you need to build a strategic plan around lending to pizza shops. But with all this external data, let's come in and do that. And then, you mentioned AI a few minutes ago, but we use machine learning, subsection of AI, to build these predictive models. And, looking at this historic data, what are the highest correlations to predict how a loan is going to perform? And one of the things that makes us different than most models have sort of a scorecard approach. Yeah. So just use unemployment as an example. As unemployment changes, that factor will have the same impact on a loan, no matter what the loan is. So we're different in all the factors that go into making the loan decision. It varies based on other factors of the loan. So if you look at something like unemployment, as unemployment increases, businesses in, that's a mortgage loan broker or home construction, those are going to be significantly impacted. If you look at something like a taxi services actually perform better as unemployment goes up. So our models actually say, okay, employment's going up, but because it's in this industry, that's a different impact than if it's in this other industry. So it's sort of a dynamic model, which we think, and it does kind of set it apart from other predictive models for loan performance.
So, and everybody, I'm certain everybody wants to know what size of businesses are you talking about?
Yeah. So we actually have two models in the market now. One is called Lumos Prime Plus. It's built specifically for loans less than $500,000.
Okay.
And it's more purely sort of an auto decisioning tool. As we back test the model and look at its performance, it performs really well and it's good for auto decisioning. Different banks have different risk tolerances for where they're going to accept an auto decision, but it performs really well for that purpose. So that's Lumos Prime Plus, $500,000 and less loan amount. And then we have a separate score. We call it a qualification grade. Qualification grade is really good for any size loan. It works fine up to $5 million. We do not market it as purely an auto decisioning grade. It's more of an early indicator of risk. You can, a bank that's getting loads of leads in can use it to prioritize loans, an initial screening of loans. But it's to inform early decisions on pricing, even early communication. How do you initially interact with that potential borrower or with that loan opportunity?
I got it. So what's in the tea leaves? So as credit tightens, does that help or hurt you? And how hard is it going to be for you to turn this mammoth lending community more data focused? And like you said, so what? You had a bad pizza loan. All right, that does not mean that all pizza shops are bad. Yep. And so, I mean, how do you change? Because in my practice, it's like, look, I'm following the data. Don't be pissed at me because the empirical evidence is this, and I'm sorry that's how it's shaking out. But there's nothing I shouldn't say there's nothing I can do. I'm only reporting on the findings.
Right.
And so I guess so your battle is with the behemoths of the industry. So I mean, what's in the tea leaves? How do they adopt this?
Yeah. So that I guess the tea leaves on credit, and how that will impact us. Yeah. So I think I'll start with, we're probably at the beginning of, kind of a credit tightening cycle. Fortunately, banks have options. So sort of what you'll see as credit loosens, you'll see more use of just conventional lending products. And then as credit tightens, a lot of those conventional deals will sort of migrate down into the SBA program. So banks have options. I think where you'll see a difference is probably in the use of conventional versus SBA products. And for listeners, thinking about conventional or SBA loan, I'm sure there's an opinion. I mean, SBA loans come with a whole lot of paperwork, but still, it's a fantastic program for expanding access to capital for small businesses. So I think you'll see an ebb and a flow. Credit tightening, I hope, since we haven't been through a tightening phase yet as a company, but I would hope, and it certainly did, in our prior experience, when you're in a credit tightening phase, banks tend to want more data to make a better decision because there's just there's a little more fear. We're taking on too much risk. So hopefully that from a Lumos perspective is a shift to wanting more data, more information to make sure you're making the right decision, but also understanding where are the right opportunities. As a banker talking, where are the right opportunities for us? What makes sense for us, our business model in our market? And that's where we can help versus a really loose market where everybody's lending to anything that comes along. Mm-hmm. There's less of a need for data in that case.
So when the banker or the underwriter or whomever is using the service, the Lumos services, so what are they required to input to get their output?
Yeah, so our newest product, which is Lumos Business Report, and it has that credit qualification grade that I previously mentioned, and it's a tool for really early on in the process. That really only requires 5 inputs. If it's an existing business, the name of the business and city where it's located. Once you start tapping in the name, we use Google Places IDs to pick up locations, so it's an easy drop down. Industry that it's in, that's a factor in how it's going to perform. The number of employees, so rough, depending on how early in the deal a banker is, that can be a rough estimate. 10 to 12, 12 to 15. To whatever the number, the loan amount, and then the purpose of the loan. So is it working capital? Is it to purchase a business? Is it acquisition? Is it equipment? Whatever.
Interesting. So
with those 5 pieces of information, we generate a 7 to 8 page report, which we do. We've built a large language model. And we use prompts to ask questions, which finds information about the business from their website or any social media presence, if they have Facebook page. And the goal there is really to create efficiencies for the underwriter or the loan officer. So when they engage with that business, they sort of have what they need right out the gate, ready to go. So that's just 5 pieces of input. Prime Plus, which is a little more robust of a model for auto decisioning, it requires more inputs, including the business owner's personal credit score. So that model runs on, I think it's 15 points of information that are needed, but it's a much more robust decisioning model.
Interesting. So in the business valuation community, all right, the world has changed to, algorithmic type valuation work. We're seeing, I last I counted, there's like eight online calculators, and some of them are pretty robust. I mean, it's pretty, I don't want to say pretty impressive, but it's pretty impressive on, from a business valuation guy. I'm like, it makes me cringe, but at the same time, that's the future. I mean, it's hard to argue that somebody can pull far more information than I can. I can make an opinion and I can communicate results. And, as a deal guy, I feel it's easier for me to communicate it if I've done the work. You know what I mean? But I look at yours and I'm trying to figure out, are you going down the same, is your path the same as the business valuation group of 5 or 7 years ago, where, and now it's just, it continues to improve with, like you said, machine learning, with AI, with all of that. It's really becoming, I'm not as reluctant to send somebody that way. So I guess I'm long question was, just, do you see yourself going down that same kind of path, that this product is just going to continue learning and evolving and broadening its service?
Definitely looking to broaden my service. So definitely an evolution there. I would say our approach a little bit different than maybe than an online business valuation calculator. Our approach is more of arming banks with the data they need to make a better decision. And, the product I was just mentioning, where we use large language models and machine learning for the early risk indicator, that's really automating a lot of the collection of information. And so what that enables is time to be spent on actually understanding the deal, time, to interact with that potential client. There's in banking, I mean, there's manual processes all over the place. And, in early stages of a loan with the BDO, the business development officer, and an underwriter, there's a large effort that goes into just collecting information. I mean, an underwriter is going to sit down and go through the Google reviews and look at the Google reviews on the business that they're getting ready to make a loan to. We pull the Google reviews for them and show them in the document. So rather than spending your time, a person spending time doing web searches, it's like, no, let us do all that. We'll automate it. It gets to you in 20 seconds after you put in those 5 inputs. Then once you have that, study it, and you interact with the borrower at that point, if you like the deal. So it's really more automation of a lot of what's been manual. Is there an evolution to more automation? I think so. I agree. But I think that human component, especially as deals get larger, that human interaction continues to remain a key piece, to assess risk by the underwriter and the underwriter.
I agree. I think that as we're talking, I think it becomes more of a filter. That does this get past? Does it get past the first hurdle? Is it a bankable type of opportunity? And that leads me to my next question is, do business, can an individual business contact you and say, look, I want to know, tell me about this particular type of business, or the business I'm looking at here. What's the likelihood, what's the Lumos risk profile on it? Can you do that?
Yeah, we've actually talked about that a lot internally. So, I mean, our focus as a company is expanding small businesses' access to funding, expanding small businesses' access to capital, and the method or the vehicle by which we do that is through banks. So our clients historically have been and are banks, but the end result is a positive impact to small businesses, and at the same time a positive impact to the banks. But yes, internally we have discussed, how do we go directly to the small business owner or the potential small business owner, or the person looking to acquire a business. What's the platform for that? Maybe instead of the bank pulling this information on the loan opportunity, maybe the loan opportunity goes to the bank and says, "Hey, I've got this Lumos report. It is the risk profile for the business I'm looking to operate. Take a look." So I think there's a place there, but then also sort of on the buy sell between business owners on the buy sell side, person selling a business having that report, a risk report, showing it to buyers, hey, this is the risk. This is how a bank is going to view the risk of my business that you're going to buy from me. And it's up to the seller to determine that they want to show that report or not. Right. But if they show the report, it's favorable. It's like, hey, I've got kind of this Lumos score, this Lumos report on the risk. It's favorable. Take a look. If you're interested in buying my business. So there's an angle there that we're definitely interested in.
Yeah, and I can totally see it. I mean, because I think a lot of people, especially those buyers that are looking at businesses that, if it's not a bankable deal, do I want to even go down that path? And which is okay. I mean, you can say, look, it didn't pass the Lumos, predictive index score. It's not high enough to be a bankable deal. So at least that seller now understands that we have to move to plan B. And that is now seller financing, earnout, some sort of vehicle that will get them out. But at least they understand that this is the next, it is what it is. But now before you're in it, and then figure out I can't get the financing I thought I would.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, what are the leading and lagging indicators that you're following? And I guess where I'm heading with it is when you got in the data, were there any surprises? Did you sit there and go, holy crap, I didn't even think of that?
Always.
Right.
Yeah. Probably some of the more interesting things are where you can find pockets of good businesses. If you think, within an industry that, broadly people view as, oh, that's a risky industry to be in. You don't want to start a business in that industry. It's not going to perform. There's always these kind of pockets you see in there, and you're like, wow, this pocket is completely different than kind of the stereotype or the stigma that comes with this industry. Sure. And then you have other places where the industry as a whole, thing is this glowing example of a wonderful industry to be in. If you have a business in this industry, it's gonna be perfect and perform well. And then there's pockets like, that might not be true. Probably one of the more interesting ones, and I've shared this before. If you look at limited service restaurants, it has a riskier profile than something like a dentist office, which has a lower risk profile. But if you start digging into limited service restaurants, and you get down to looking at Jimmy John's, to kind of the Jimmy John's franchise, what you'll see is a Jimmy John's franchise from a loan, credit quality standpoint. A Jimmy John's performs the same as a dentist office. Yeah. So Jimmy John's and a dentist have very similar risk profiles, but limited service restaurants has a much riskier profile as a whole. So kind of back to the, we did one pizza shop and it failed. It's kind of the same thing. If someone's shying away from the limited service restaurant industry because it's risky, it's like, you probably need to look down into the data and find those pockets where it makes sense.
Yeah. I'm wondering, and like I said, I have this other platform that's been a hobby of mine, and I'm just curious to know, do you inadvertently make businesses more saleable by your score? You know what I mean? That's not your intent, but the interesting thing is, as I hear you talk and I look at it through the eyes of a buyer, that, if it has this thumbs up from Lumos, it's like, wow, I didn't, that says something. And I'm really interested, and that's kind of how I want to tie it up here is, what does 5 years look like for you guys? Where are you and what are you doing?
Yeah, well, if I'm dreaming big,
it's the only way to it's the only way to dream.
It's exactly what you just said. It's something. Banks right now for a small business loan, they will put a lot of emphasis on personal credit score. Too much emphasis, actually. It's important, but too much emphasis, and it kind of step back and you're like, wait a minute, why does the owner's personal credit score have such an outsized impact on this small business loan that, there's 15 employees, there's, other managers, there's so much more that goes into it. But nobody digs into that, owner's personal credit score. What is a 680 really? What is a 700? It's just, they have these numbers and they go by. Dreaming big 5 years from now, Lumos, kind of to your 2 thumbs up, comment on this business, I got a 2 thumbs up from Lumos. Having that sort of appeal and trust among banks or among buyers and sellers of businesses that the Lumos score or the Lumos grade, depending on the product, the packet, the 7-page packet, that we have on the business, that there's sort of broad acceptance and trust in that package, if we're doing our jobs correctly. Yeah. Where a bank says, okay, Lumos gives this, X score or Y score. Yeah. And the seller of the business reads a report like, hey, this is good. I want potential buyers to know this, that there's this use of Lumos that helps expand lending through a better understanding versus kind of this over-reliance on these legacy scores that sort of trickled into the small business world over time that don't really mean as much as they could. It's important. Don't get me wrong. It's important. It's a factor. But I think there's an over-reliance on some of those legacy factors.
Yeah, I get you. So the last question I've asked this for, let's see, you're episode 103 or 4. So I've asked this from every guest, and that is, if you had one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners that would have the most impact on their business, and you can read the data, what would you say makes the best impact or the greatest impact based on the Lumos score? How's that?
Wow. Honestly, I think probably surrounding yourself with good folks. One of the things we look at if you look at a business, if there's a single owner versus multiple owners, multiple owner businesses tend to perform better than single owner businesses. Why? Uncertain, but probably because there's sort of a healthy discussion about business trajectory. You don't need multiple owners to have those kind of discussions. If you're a single owner, find good folks in the industry. I'm fortunate to work with a lot of good folks, and we have constructive debates on paths. What are the right decisions? Taking that approach, maybe said another way, a mentor in the space. Just somebody to bounce ideas off of. What's worked in the past, because there's lots of history. With just about everything. You need to kind of build on those learnings versus, and I've made this mistake, having to relearn the bad decisions yourself.
We've all paid a lot of tuition. Yep. All right. So what's the best way we can get in contact with you? I'll have it in the show notes, but where do we find you?
Yeah, you can check us out at lumosdata.com. That's LUMOSDATA.com. Also LinkedIn. You can check me out on LinkedIn, Brett Caines, as well as Lumos. It's actually Lumos Technologies on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I will have that in the show notes. So Brett, man, I told you I've been looking forward to this, and like I said, I've been in the business for 31 years. I've been watching buying and selling for a long time, and so you see the evolution of, you start to see where it's going. And when I was, newer in the industry, I didn't see the transaction patterns and the things that I didn't think were viable are now commonplace. And now, I see something like what you're doing, and it's, it really gets me stoked. So I'm really grateful that you came on to hang out and share a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Definitely enjoyed it very much. Happy to come back anytime.
This was another episode of the Defenders of Business Value podcast. For more episodes packed with strategies to increase the value of your business, visit defendersofbusinessvalue.com for show notes, transcripts, and free tools to start you on your journey. Subscribe now so you don't miss any future episodes.